Hi, my name is John Putch. You may remember me as Mordock and Mendon, the blue-headed Benzite creature in Star Trek The Next Generation, and also the guy with the camera attached to his head in Generations, the movie. And you're listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. Every Star Trek fan has their favorite alien. Some favor Klingons, others love Cardassians, and me, I like them all just as much as the next Trekkie, but I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Benzites. I don't know if it's because of my fondness for aquatic invertebrates and how seeing this race maybe reminds me of one, or maybe it's just that Benzites seem a little bit more like Star Wars cantina creatures to me than they do Star Trek aliens. And it tickles me so much that this one alien seems to mix both those fandoms together in a way that not really too many others in Trek have. Either way, I'm a Benzite fan through and through, and today we're talking with the first person to ever wear that Benzite makeup. John Putch played Mordock in the TNG Season 1 episode Coming of Age, where he, along with Wesley Crusher and a few other hopefuls, tried to enter Starfleet Academy by taking the test. Putch returned to play another Benzite in the Season 2 classic A Matter of Honor, this time serving aboard the bridge of the Enterprise. This actor came back to the franchise years later in the Star Trek Generations film, where he played a journalist on the bridge of the Enterprise B in the opening scenes of the film. For a point of reference, Putch is the guy that gets shoved by William Shatner, and yeah, he's got some pretty crazy stories about his time on that set. Beyond Star Trek, John has appeared in Grace Under Fire, Home Improvement, 21 Jump Street, Wings, The Magical World of Disney, The Love Boat, Seinfeld, Newhart, Hill Street Blues, One Day at a Time, and All in the Family. And speaking of All in the Family, John is the son of Gene Stapleton, who classic TV lovers will know best as Edith Bunker from All in the Family. So today, John's got a lot of stories to share about his time being in a variety of Norman Lear productions and just hanging around on set with some of those luminaries from the good old days of television. Outside of acting, John has an enormous resume of directing credits in television shows and films, including Scrubs, Ugly Betty, The Tracy Morgan Show, Grounded for Life, Cougar Town, Blackish, American Pie Presents The Book of Love, Pursuit of Happiness, and American Housewife. He's also made plenty of indie films on his own, so for any guerrilla filmmakers out there, or people who want to go into this direction of making movies, but want to do it their way, this episode is going to be a good one for you to hear. Now, before we start this week's episode, I want to ask you, are you following Trek Untold on social media? If you're not yet, please make sure to check out Trek Untold on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, so you can get the latest updates on the guests we're speaking to each week, along with all sorts of other great things we show. If you've been enjoying this show, please consider supporting us by checking out our merchandise on teespring.com/stores/trekuntold, where we've got mugs, t-shirts, cell phone cases, and all sorts of other crazy stuff you can buy to show off how much you love Trek Untold. Or please consider supporting us on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold. We've got a few different benefit tiers that help us out and give you a little something extra each week for the show. If you're a new listener or a regular listener who hasn't done this yet, please, of course, don't forget to subscribe to us whether you're watching us on YouTube or on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio or video platforms you might find this show. And if you've been enjoying Trek Untold, whether it be the audio version or the video version, please make sure to leave a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you're checking out the show. Or if you're watching it on youtube.com/nerdnewstoday, make sure to leave a comment and give us a thumbs up. Those little tiny things that'll take you a few moments to do will help this show out for light years to come, and ensure that other people are able to find Trek Untold and give it a listen. And if you're a member of this audience who has already done one or several of those things already, thank you so much for your support. And if you haven't had a chance to do any of those things yet, we still thank you very much for choosing to listen today to Trek Untold. There's a ton of other Star Trek podcasts out there, and there's only so many hours in the day, so we really do appreciate you choosing this one to check out for the time we're spending with you now. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our sponsor at Triple Fiction Productions, who makes some amazing 3D printed Star Trek inspired dioramas and props for both Star Trek action figures and Star Trek fans in person. Whether you're a cosplayer or a toy collector, there's plenty of stuff to check out from Triple Fiction Productions, but you're going to hear a little bit more about them later on. So without further ado, let's begin this week's episode. Computer, access interview file. And welcome back to Trek Untold. And now joining us on the other side of the screen, you may recognize him from his appearances in Star Trek, or at least one of those three, because two of them, not so much. He's done a lot of work in Star Trek, and he's done plenty of things on screen and off as well behind the lens. So we're talking today with Mr. John Putch. John, how are you today?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
And I should have asked before we started. Is it Putch or how do you? Is there a
Now
preferred way
you
to
got
say
it
it?
right.
I got it right first try.
Look, my side of the family, we pronounce it Putch, but my Pittsburgh relatives, they all say Putch, which I don't understand because it's an Italian derivation. The name was Pucci originally, and it was changed to Putch on Ellis Island, and I don't know how they got Putch out of it, but we say Putch in show business. Thanks.
So Putch it is. All right. So John, let's kick off this interview the same way I like to start things with all my guests, and that's what's your earliest memory of Star Trek?
Oh, well, I'll tell you. That's a great question. I remember as a kid, I lived in a rural town in Pennsylvania, and we only had three channels, and one that could come in over the antenna, and one of which was the channel that carried Star Trek. So we were riveted every week for all three seasons of that original show. I couldn't believe it. And then I just couldn't believe the colors. I couldn't believe the adventures. Uh, it was just an amazing thing for a kid in the in the late '60s, and I've followed it along the whole time. And whenever it's on TV, I can't shut it off. I'm stunned. I just can't stop watching it. I love the corny, hammy Shatner stuff. Who, and by the way, he continued that trend in his life, which I think is a compliment. He's very entertaining, and I just loved. I don't know. It was just. I can't turn it off when it's on. And then I was lucky enough to get on the show later.
So let's talk a little bit more. You just kind of talked a little about some of your backstory, but tell us a little about where you grew up, who your parents were. I know who one of them was, and what you wanted to be when you grew up.
Well, I grew up in South Central Pennsylvania. My father ran and he operated a summer stock, legitimate summer stock theater, and he was the artistic director. And it was him, me, my sister, and my mom. And early on, he threw us on stage, and mom worked there as well. And then she hit it big on a TV series in the early '70s called All in the Family, and that would be Gene Stapleton. And when we start returning to do the plays at Totem Pole, all of a sudden, the audience is just smashed through the doors, and we had sellouts all the time because they wanted to see mom. And but that's where I grew up my training as an actor, and and I ran the follow spot and parked cars and all that stuff, and that's where I came from. And then as we transitioned to California for half the time, because we'd come out and in the wintertime and be with mom while she did her show, I was introduced to television, uh, when I was about 10 or 11 in terms of working on it or seeing it shot and everything. And then I sort of got into the business out here, but always in the summers we'd head back to Pennsylvania and do theater.
So, how involved were your parents in your acting education?
Well, I credit them with any education I had in it. I had no formal training until high school when was in the drama class, and then of course then in college. But prior to that, he stuck me on stage at age 5, my dad, and I just sort of learned by watching all the other great actors that were at this theater. And it was funny because a lot of my technique came from learning from these great theater people that did comedies and farces and and not much drama at that theater, musicals and all that stuff. And I kind of learned everything there. When I got on television as a young man or a kid, I was way over the top. I was playing to the back of the house, and you don't do that in TV. You literally you just need to convince the other person in the scene what you're saying. You don't need to telegraph it to 50 feet back to the back row, which is what you do in theater or did then. So I had a big, and no one ever told me, hey, dial it down, John. This isn't theater. I had to figure it out on my own, and I believe that is the reason. Even my parents didn't do it. I believe that is the reason why early in my career I did nothing but sitcoms. and broad comedies as an actor, because I sort of fit in, because you could be that large. And it wasn't until I was in, like, I guess, my early 20s when I started paying attention to other actors on television. I go, that person's not doing anything. I should try that. And I started trying that at my next auditions, and I started getting dramatic parts. And that's when I figured it out. So completely self-taught. I when I went into acting school at USC for the brief year I was there, I was already acting on television on a show called One Day at a Time. And I had already done, like, 15 or 16 plays, and so I was already kind of working. So I had developed a technique. So it was hard for me to change it. And so I can't, I look back on my acting days as that was fun. I really lucked out and muddled through that profession. What I really was good at was making movies, and then that paid off later.
It's kind of interesting because you're basically picking up all these instincts that a lot of actors don't get till much later on in life, and you're just getting this real crash course thrown into things, and that's pretty amazing. That's quite a gift to get.
Yeah, I appreciate what I went through. And I also am well aware of the luck factor and the who you know factor, because I would never have appeared on my first show, which was All in the Family, unless I was in my mother's dressing room after a taping on a Friday night, and the casting director walked by and said, "Hey, how would you like to play a Boy Scout next week's show?" And I was like, "What, Mom? Can I?" And then that's what started it for me. In samesies, was how I got onto One Day at a Time, because as I grew up as a young man, I was in high school. The same casting director walks by one night and goes, "Hey, do you want to read for a part on One Day at a Time, for next week?" And I go, "Yeah." And I read for a role, and I got it because I got a laugh. And that's how I ended up, coming onto that show. They just kept bringing me back because they liked the character, who was this innocent, klutzy guy named Bob, who was in love with Valerie Bertinelli. And I was on that show over 6 years, like, I don't know, 13, 14 times. So, luck. I'm telling you. And then it wasn't until after that, like, I literally got a real agent and was able to go out on auditions for complete strangers. Well, they were strangers before, but really without any, you know, nobody knew who I was or anything. So I was really, out there in the dark, feeling out how you go about it. And I got pretty good at it, and I did okay in the 80s. But I'm sure I'm glad I don't do it anymore, because I do not want to learn all those lines. I really don't. Which reminds me of a story on Next Generation. When we get to that, I'll tell you about that.
Yeah, we got a little bit of ways to get to our Star
Yep.
Trek talk because there's so much more to talk about. You've had, even just as a young kid, you had a lot going on in terms of acting, and you're around all this royalty. You're around Carol Connor, you're around Sally
Mhm.
Struthers, Rob Reiner,
Yeah.
of course, Norman Lear. He's basically the godfather of sitcoms in a lot of ways. He's really, man, it's
Mhm.
made so many amazing works. What's it like just being around all these people? I mean, as a young kid, did you really appreciate or understand that you were around these kind of like well-known names?
No, because at the time, well, I knew when the show was red hot. Yes, we were all aware of how, big it was and how famous everybody was. When you're interrupted at dinner out with your family, like 3, 4 times in one seating, by people who want pictures and autographs of Mom, you realize, whoa, this is huge. But during the time that I lived it, with that being Mom's job. No, that was Mom's work family, and we were included. And my father and my sister, we would all be greeted warmly, and we all knew each other by name. We would go to Norman's house, we'd go to Carol's house. We loved Sally. Rob was funny and friendly, didn't know him that well, but worked for him in later years on one of his first films, or second or third film. And but they were just sort of your 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 mom's work friends. And I had a relationship with Norman for years. I mean, we had shared the same birthday, and for many years we would try to call each other first on our birthdays and see who could beat the other one till I gotcha. And that thing didn't stop. In fact, it picked up again like about, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, and we started doing it. And he was going, oh, I'm so glad to talk to you. And of course, he was the first person my sister and I called when my mom passed. We needed his advice on what to do, when to release the news, and we wanted him to know. And my father had already passed away at the time, so it was like really there was like kind of he seemed to be the most important guy to call first. But yeah, it was pretty fun, and I got to the other shows that were all under the same roof. At one time, Norman moved all the shows. He moved All in the Family, um, Maud. Uh, I'm not sure if Jefferson's was on yet or not. One of them, Mary Hartman, maybe. I don't know. He moved them all from CBS Television City in Hollywood. He moved them all to the KTTV studios, which was the local channel 11. And it was a television studio on Sunset Boulevard or Hollywood Boulevard. And it had like, I don't know, must have had 6 or 7 stages. Do you know about this?
I don't think I know much about that. No.
Okay. Well, anyway, it was like a local news affiliate, but it was a full on studio. He took it over basically. He had All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Maud, Good Times. And then somewhere in there, Facts of Life got in. We don't know how they made it in there, but they were the lone show that wasn't his. Then they were next door to us. Oh, One Day at a Time was there. So you had all of them. And what I was going to say is I got to know Sherman Hemsley, who played George Jefferson, and it was like a fun theatery, collegey like campusy feel with all these incredible hit shows that all had spun off from All in the Family at this one studio. And when you'd go to, and I happened to be on One Day at a Time at the time. So down the hallway was Mom on her show, rehearsing and shooting, and Sherman and his group was down the hall. And, you'd see them in the hall and you'd stop and they'd hug you and you'd say hi and all that stuff. And it was quite you look back on it and you just go, that was really fun and really unique. And I'm so glad I got to be a part of it.
I'm wondering if you happen to have any stories about B. Arthur or Sherman. We mentioned Sherman, but are there any like
Yeah.
real memories you have of any of those people that you can share with us today?
Yeah. Sherman was always a friend to me. And whenever I'd see him in the hall, I go, Johnny Putch, he'd go out of his way to take me into his show and, introduce me to people. And then years later, I didn't see much of him for many years. And then years later, I'm directing one of the American Pie movies up in Vancouver. And one of the things that I pitched was, let's have all these cameo roles be stunt cast by all these 70s and 80s icons. And they bought it. And Sherman came up and played this really funny priest in a church who drops the F bomb. And I got to have a reunion with him. I got to have dinner with him, and I got to shoot one day with him and take pictures with him, and we kept in touch. And then, like, boom, all of a sudden he's gone. One day he's passed. And I go, oh my God, I just talked to him 6 months ago, and he asked me if I was doing anything and if he could work on it. And I'm just like, breaks my heart. Love that I got that time with Sherman. B, loved B. I went to grade school with her son, Matthew and Daniel, and I still am friends with Matt today. And we're in touch a lot because we were both children of, television actresses that basically led the same life. They were at the Emmy Awards every year. They were on really high ranked comedies. Um, they were highly treasured characters in television. So I had a great time with B and her son. And I love B because when I was at Television City visiting Mom at All in the Family, I'd be walking down the big halls there where all the sound stages are. It's like a big cavern, like a barn hallway, like the size of a Costco. Okay. And then on each side, you are just rows of giant elephant doors. This is at Television City, still that way. It's where Red Skelton taped. It's where Carol Burnett taped. It's where Match Game in the 70s taped. It was a big Glenn Campbell show, all the big shows. Anyway, you'd walk down these halls, and all the set pieces from all these shows would be in there. And I was walking down. I wanted to say hi to B because I was I was visiting mom that week or something. So I go down and I go to the giant scene door that lets you into the big stage, which they close when they shoot. Bill Macy, who played Walter, the husband, is standing there shooting the shit with somebody, and I'm walking past him to go look for B, and he goes, oh, hold on, what are you doing? I go, I came to see B. He goes, well, who are you? What are you? You can't just walk in here. I go, I, I, I'm this little fat kid, and I'm like getting scared by Bill Macy. And then from behind, a la Maude, in a booming voice, you hear B say, Bill, let John Putch pass through, please. And he went, Bill Macy, and go ahead, and I ran past him, and B, hugging B, and I was a kid. Anyway, that's a funny story, but she was a great lady too, and we laughed a lot with her as well. So it's pretty fun. I had some good stories in that era growing up, and I remember a lot of them. And then I have a ton more as I made my way through my weird checkered career, of my own.
During these formative years when you're just on these sets, I know you're doing the acting thing at this point, but are you thinking about directing at all? Is that something that's coming to you as a child?
Yeah, because I guess in grade school, my dad gave me a Super 8 camera, and he was a 8 millimeter guy, as all parents were in the 60s. For those who don't know this, there were no video cameras, and there was nothing. There was snapshot cameras, and there was 8 millimeter, and sometimes even 16 millimeter. And you would buy the cartridges or the spools, you'd put them in your camera, and that's what you shot your home movies with. Okay, so Dad, he's a director and a funny man. He's constantly making videos. He's constantly making films starring my sister and I in them and creating little stories. He would edit them together. He would make a soundtrack on an audio tape, and and when he'd get it all finished, we'd all gather in the living room on some night, and he would show the film, and it was the best thing ever, and it was great entertainment. And he was such an entertainer, especially to his family. And that's where I picked it up. And then one day, I'm in grade school, he gives me this camera, and he goes, here, play with this for a while. And then the school, the very progressive Hollywoody grade school that I was sent to, that that predated Crossroads, of those who know what that is, had a filmmaking class on every Friday in my class. So I learned how to edit there, splice film and all that stuff, and we would make films all over campus. And Matt Sachs, who was B. Arthur's son, was there too, and we all did the same thing. So he gives me that camera, and then years go by, and he gives me another camera when I'm a teenager, and he says, "You need to call your friends and go make some movies on the weekend." And I'm sure wanted me to do this to stay out of trouble. And so he gave me another camera, and I met some Super 8 nuts in junior high and high school, and we started making you know, Super 8s, and they were huge. I mean, big. I did a Batman and Robin spoof in Super 8 with sound and sound effects and a separate, soundtrack. We did a Dirty Harry spoof. We did a Star Wars spoof where we built cockpits and pretended to be in the Millennium Falcon. This stuff's available online, by the way. I'm just saying, and and it's hilarious. And we'd take the script from Get Smart, which was another one of our favorite shows. We'd take the jokes and we'd steal them and put them into our script, and just so we could hear ourselves. And then you take the movie around at school the following year and show it in the classrooms and get out of class by doing that. We literally solicited all the classes and said, "Hey, we have a movie. We shot it at school. Can we come show it in class?" Yeah, and they book it, and you get out of your other classes to go, "Hey, the guys that show the movie." So literally, we used it as a way to get out of doing work, and we also We also did a bunch of, instead of writing a final paper for history class or government or whatever, we'd make a movie, and it usually in was just the bare minimum what you're supposed to know about the subject, but somehow we passed because we got, we got the for effort. So that's how I got involved in making movies, and I got really serious about it, you know, towards the end of high school, and as I was moving into college, and I knew I had to graduate to a real short film and a real 16 millimeter and have a real, all that stuff. So my efforts were spent in the late 70s, early 80s in trying to do that. And I used my acting money to make a bunch of short subjects, all 16 millimeter. And they were expensive then. And by the third time, the third one, I kind of got it right, and good enough that I was able to use it to say, "Hey, I'm a director. Will you hire me?" And it's that was a hard road to get into TV. It took 10 years to get into TV, but it only took one day on a basketball court with somebody who made low budget movies to say, "Yeah, can you do this kids movie in 12 days?" And I say, "Yes." And and that's how I got started with 35 millimeter and real directing. Uh, Great training ground. I worked for Andrew Stevens, the former actor and big shot Hollywood producer, and he came out of Corman, and he created his own empire in the '80s with direct-to-video stuff, famous direct-to-video stuff, and he had a machine and a factory going, and all he cared about was could I bring it in, you know, at this level or at this many days. And of course, I wasn't going to say no, I can't. So that's how it started, uh, and I was able to use those to move into legit TV, which, like I said, took me 10 years. Today, it doesn't take people that long at all.
Different world today. Yeah, very
Yeah,
different.
different world. Yep.
So recently we had on Billy Van Zandt, one of our guests on Trek Untold, and we talked about his appearance in Jaws 2. And I
Hmm.
guess I'm going to have an oral history of the Jaws films because you were in Jaws 3D, right?
That's right. That's
So
right.
yeah, that was with Dennis Quaid, Louis Gossett Jr., Leah
Mhm.
Thompson. Jaws 1
Bess
was the big
Armstrong.
blockbuster. Yeah.
Hmm.
Jaws 2, maybe not quite as much. Jaws 3D, now we're getting to gimmick territory here.
Oh,
Yeah, but what do you remember about working on Jaws 3?
well, it was a fantastically gimmick movie. It was the worst one until four came out, and but I got to tell you, I loved it. I loved being a part of that. I have such great stories and memories, and the people on it work so hard. So when I say it wasn't a good one, it's not to knock anybody on it. It's just, it just was one of those things. It was just turned out the way it turned out. But had a great time on that. I was like 20 years old. I thought my life was going to change, and it, it didn't really. But I got to work with all those people and got to know them. I still am in touch with the director Joe Alves, sweetheart. He just put a book out. It's incredible about his with his drawings and his because he was a huge is still and was a great production designer. Uh, Joe Alves, who directed John, he did the production design on the first two movies. He also did Close Encounters. He also did Starman. He also, he's a big shot, huge, and I'm still in touch with him today. And he does a lot of appearances, and sweet guy. And I'm in touch with a bunch of people from that show. So it was a great time.
Now I just remind me because I haven't seen Jaws 3D in quite some time. I might keep it that way. But does your character survive? I think he does, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They shipped me off early. Once Leah got bit in the bumper boat scene, and I pull her out of the water. They put us in an ambulance, and then that's the last you see of us. Those two characters, they're gone to the hospital, and the rest of the movie, they're underwater fighting a shark that has a really bad green screen key, as it approaches the camera.
Which is fun to say because here we are now with green screens in 2020, and this is probably way better than Jaws 3D still.
Well, look, there's no green screen behind me aside from that little, aberration around our heads. Looks pretty good. I mean, this line on the black shirt is crazy that there's no green screen to key that. It's amazing.
It's fun watching like older sci-fi films, especially because I do a lot of chroma key stuff on videos I do for my YouTube channel, and I was
Hmm.
looking at stuff I see, from the 70s or 60s. I'm like, man, we're doing the things that cost them millions back then
Yep.
at a fraction of the cost. It's just kind of
Yep.
amazing to think about.
It is truly amazing what you can do. I have a bagged green screen in my garage. I use it. I'll pull it out all the time for stuff.
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hello, everyone. I'm Armin Shimmerman. Perhaps you know me better as Quark from Deep Space Nine. As your favorite Ferengi, I'm here to promote a sale. It's not self-sealing stem bolts, but my new novel, Illyria. And the first book is called The Betrayal of Angels. Some of you may not know that aside from being an actor, I'm also a novelist. My newest novel is a mystery set in 1583. Its heroes are the historical characters of John Dee, who was a spiritualist, a book collector, and a spy. With him is an unsuccessful playwright named William Shakespeare. Their mission is to investigate a nobleman who happens to be Count Orsino from Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. The book employs comedy, history, and fantasy to tell a page-turner of a story. It reads a lot like Sherlock Holmes, or like one of my favorite shows, Homeland. Please check out my website at www.arminshimmerman, get the name right, .com, or you can get it directly from my publisher at www.jumpmasterpress.com. You can buy it either as a paperback, a hardback, or an ebook. So why don't you check it out and judge for yourself? Or better yet, give it as a gift to someone. I know they'll appreciate it. Disclaimer, no latinum accepted.
We now return to Trek Untold.
So, John, let's go ahead and beam up into our Star Trek discussion because we got a lot to discuss today. So, your first time in the series was season 1, Coming of Age, and you are Mordock, the first ever Benzite in Star Trek history. So, tell us, how'd you got cast for that role?
Well, as an actor, you get to know casting directors, and they have you in when you do good for them. And this casting director was Junie Lowry. I don't think she was Johnson yet, Junie Lowry Johnson, and she cast that show. And I was one of her faves. Um, so I came in and read for that character, and I think my Britishy theater acting worked pretty well, even though I wasn't British. I just had a very affected, I used a very affected voice. I read amongst so many people, but I got it. That's how it happened. And it's because she knew me and said, we got to get John should come in and read. I'd read for the pilot. I'd read for almost every episode. I mean, I was at the Paramount lot constantly, me and I don't know, a dozen other actors and actresses you'd see every week who, were all really, really good. And she was hoping, to work through all of them to get on the show. And she did pretty much. I mean, all those people ended up doing guest shots that she brought in. And it was her kind of stable of people. So very, very grateful for that. But it was really fun. Then immediately you're sent to Paramount to see Michael Westmore to get your Blue Head cast made. So I had to do the whole, lie back, and they put the straws in your nose and pour all the goop over your head. I mean, it was quite. I couldn't do it today. I would be really. I'd feel like I was going to suffocate. But as a young guy, I felt okay, and I was into this kind of makeup technique. So it was very interesting for me. So yeah, did a head cast. Then they'd pour the molds later. They'd have me back like 2-3 days later. This is all during prep of another episode. So I made several trips down there, and had to put all this stuff on, and then when they finally got it all made, it was like I would have a 3 a.m. call in order to be on set by 7. And so I would show up at the lot, like, when people were wrapping and going home from a long shoot of something else. And I'd walk across in the dark, and there was Michael Westmore. I mean, at least on the first episode I did, who put me all together. And it took hours. I'd fall asleep. And then I couldn't eat all day. I had to use a straw, and no one knew what I looked like. So I'd come on to set. Hey, it's Johnny Frakes or Wil Wheaton or anybody. They'd all look at me and go, "Hey, John, how you doing?" But none of them knew who the hell I was when I took the makeup off. I got out early one day, and all the makeup they take it off for you as well. And I was walking past Frakes, and I go, "Hey, Johnny, see you tomorrow." And he looked at me like, "Who the hell's that?" And I go, "It's Putch, the blue-headed, guy on the show this week." He goes, "Oh my God," So, but most people did not. I'd appear on on stage already in this unrecognizable blue outfit, and it was very funny. And I went to the commissary one day to have lunch just to see what I could, sip. And it was really funny walking around Paramount in the late 80s, because Star Trek was the king. The Next Generation show was pretty much the king there, and there were like aliens and Federation, Starfleet outfits. It was like that movie, the Tim Allen movie, Galaxy Quest, right? It was exactly like that. It was like going to a convention. It was pretty fun. And and I beat Wil Wheaton. I beat Will Crusher. I got into Starfleet Academy over him.
You did, but he did help you out. We can't ever forget that part there.
He did help me out. That's right.
Did you get to spend a lot of time with the other guest stars? I mean, as mentioned, you did the scene with Wil Wheaton, but Robert Ito was also in that. Taja Valenza was in that, and Estee Chandler. Did you guys hang out much offset?
I was with Taja and Will mostly, because that's all my stuff was with. So that's who I remember. The second time around, when I was the other character, I spent a little more time with the other folks.
And being that this is season 1 of TNG, this is now the rebirth, if you will, of Star Trek. And being someone that watched it as you grew up, what did you think about the new sets? Had you actually watched any episodes of TNG yet? Like, I don't know if it had premiered by the time you did this episode, but what did you think of the new look of Star Trek?
I totally was. I was at the edge of my seat the night it aired, and I couldn't believe it was on the not a main network. It was the first time I was going, wow, this is a big show on a local channel, is what it was out here, an affiliate. Anyway, I thought it was. It looked at the beginning to me, it looked real video-y, the space stuff and all this, the exteriors of the ships and stuff. It looked kind of video-y, but I was way into the whole thing. It didn't take long to get used to it. I was just, you're in shock when you watch the first one. Really, if you're expecting it to be anything like the old one, but then there were some dazzling, digital effects that, we'd never seen before, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I loved it. Was hooked. Watched them all.
So you returned in season 2 again as a Benzite, but this time as Mendon. And I heard the reason they brought you back was because they literally just wanted to cut some costs here, and they're like, "Well, he already got the makeup done, so let's bring him back." Is that true?
You just took my story away. Yeah.
I ruined the whole thing. You can tell it better. Go ahead, please.
No. Yeah, I got the call to come back, and I was like, "Oh my God, they love me. I did so good. I get to do it again." And I went back thinking, this was, and I had played a whole different character. I got to wear a Starfleet uniform with the girdle. I got to wear a girdle, what all the guys wear on that show. And I had the communicator and the whole it was fantastic. I looked slim, and I was just so happy to be there. And then I realized, as I became a director years later, and I was aware of budgets and schedules and what you do to make things easier, I realized they didn't call me because they thought it was great. They had the mold already and the head made for me. Who else are they going to call? They're not going to spend whatever it costs to make another one for some other actor. They're going to get me. So they wrote, let's get the guy, get 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 that guy that played the blue head. We'll just use that again, because every week there was an alien. So yeah, that's my story, and that's what I say anytime I'm interviewed, because it has to be true. No, there's no one has like confirmed that, but I'm here to tell you, as a filmmaker and a director and a producer, I know exactly. I would do the same exact thing, and I would just rewrite the script to have it explain why it's a different guy. Pretty funny. But it just goes to show you how actors, when you're not, actors can be so self-absorbed and myopic about how they fit into the whole puzzle, and because they're constantly insulated from everything. They're literally just coddled and moved about and given things and told how great they are and everything, and they really don't. No one's ever said, hey, come over here, I want to show you how this camera works, or this light, or this dolly. Let me show you this special effect. No one ever does that. So consequently, unless you're curious, like someone like me, you're never going to know that stuff. So you can only imagine everything is about you. So I understand. I understand how I didn't realize that at the time.
And on that same kind of topic, again, we're talking about you being the director. Were you talking to the directors or watching what they were doing, picking up any notes on how they were making a show happen?
Yeah, because I was, I was like 2-3 years removed from my first short film, and I was planning my next. And on both those, the first episode was Michael Vihar, who was just, he's a TV directing titan. And I also did a pilot with him for Disney called Double Agent with Michael McKean, and I played his sidekick, and I got to be with Michael again, or maybe it was the reverse. Might have been the reverse. I might have done Star Trek second. No. Anyway, Michael was great. That guy was really efficient and simple and helpful. I always watch. I mean, from the day one I got onto a set, I never left it. I don't, when they say we need you in half an hour, I don't leave. I just sat there and watched and noticed, and I was into the gear and the tech and all that stuff. Second episode I did was Matter of Honor, was directed by Rob Bowman, the great Rob Bowman, who went on to X-Files fame, if you know that guy. And he was really cool, young at the time, young hotshot, and he had a whole different manner. He was a little more casual, relaxed, and you know his he was helpful. He also did a fantastic job as well. But I wasn't timing the days because I was in torture under that mask. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. Take that shit off before you
Understandable.
reach up and like pull it off yourself. I wonder how they do it today. If I'm sure the techniques have improved. Less pieces probably.
It's probably still just as torturous, though, to get it all done.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, I paid close attention to that stuff. Always did. And I was very fascinated by the effects. So I spent a lot of time walking behind the sets and looking at stuff and how they built things and all that kind of thing. And that was pretty wondrous. And I knew I was on the second Star Trek show, so I took full advantage of looking at everything I could as best I could, and I'd walk over across to the next stage and look at a set that they were building for another episode, and I would just be just amazed. It's pretty cool.
Just on that topic of them bringing you back to play this Benzite character again, do you think it was an inside joke when Wesley said, "You look a lot like Mordock"? Is that them kind of acknowledging that's the same actor behind the mask, or is that just kind of just happenstance?
Oh no, I think that was intentional. I don't know if it was because it was supposed to be me, but I did look the same, and so he had to say something. Otherwise, people would go, wait a second, why doesn't he say anything? So they wisely, referenced it, and we had that exchange where I say, no, I'm Mendon, or whatever my name was. Was it Mendon in the second one? Yeah,
You're Mendon
Lieutenant.
in the second. Yep, Mendon in the second. You're Mordock in the first. It's confusing.
Yeah, and I'm a trading card. I'm an action figure, which I have a signed action figure from Michael Westmore, and the package is signed by him. And I'm in the encyclopedia apparently as the only Benzite and the actor to play a Benzite of two different characters of the same species.
That's true. Yeah, as far as I know, I think the only other person to wear the Benzite makeup was Hillary Shepard, and she was like the first female Benzite.
Is
So
that right? I
I don't
missed
think
that.
there's too many. Yeah, she was in Deep Space Nine.
Oh, that's why. Yeah, they said, "Oh, of course it did," and they probably went, "We like that, how that looked. Let's do this again on a gal. Let's bring a Benzite back."
I'm glad you mentioned your action figure. I'm a big action figure collector myself, and I love getting guests on who have figures of themselves. So in your case, you have a Benzite. It's not exactly your likeness, but what do
No.
you think of this action figure? And I want to ask if it looks like you and if you like the representation of it, but it's not exactly John Putch.
Oh no, but I'm not John Putch when I'm in that outfit. I'm this. I'm. Who am I? I'm no. You can't. It's not me. It's my voice. I look nothing like me. I mean, some people will recognize the voice and maybe recognize the mouth. People close to me, but no, it doesn't look a thing like me. No, it's a little action figure that's a caricature of that outfit. Really, I don't think it's supposed to look like me. I mean, if I was a humanoid, I guess I would, then be able to answer that question. But no, I'm luckily just, was a monster basically, or an alien. Sorry, a Benzite.
Right, that's right. Yeah. Now, I've got a super nerdy observation for you. I'm wondering if you got an answer for this one now. So,
Okay.
I noticed that in your first appearance, Mendon's a breathing device. It's got some illuminations on it. So, in your first appearance, it's a really bright red and yellow light. Whereas when you come back this time around, it's just a white and it's a lot softer. Do you remember that at all? Do you remember why? I mean, I don't want to ask if you remember why they changed the colors, but do you remember the colors and the lights and that being distracting for you or anything about that at all?
I don't remember the color change, but I'll tell you probably why they did that. It's probably because the prop genius was tinkering around with improving it for the next time. And I'm sure in their mind, they go, this looks better with white because the smoke, you can see the smoke better if you use white light, a soft LED white light. Whereas the colored stuff, you probably didn't see the smoke puff as well. And that's my guess, knowing if it were me and I had to do it again and I looked at it like that. But there wasn't any I wasn't told them anything like in a story sense why it was different. I'm sure they were improving it, but they didn't improve having to drop dry ice crystals into a little tray and me having to keep my head up high enough so you don't dip forward too far so you could actually see inside, that what was, to blow the cover of that it's a bunch of ice crystals. And I was constantly being asked to like puff while I was talking. I'm going, well, I can't puff while I'm talking, but I can maybe do it in between because there's this tray like right here. And I'm having to say this inordinately complicated, jargony speech and then go with my nose, blow air out of my nose or my mouth so no one would see it. So the dry ice would like puff. And it was really difficult to do. And they weren't going to do that with CG. I don't think they had good CG smoke then. So that was a constant effort for me, was to try to work that into like speeches and sentences. I'd usually cock my head and try to do it, at the end of a speech or at the beginning of a speech, but it was really hard to do. Almost as hard as the dialogue they gave me in Matter of Honor. Oh my God.
You had a lot to work with in Matter of Honor. I mean, that was a much beefier role than Mendon was. Mordock gets to say more. He gets to be on the bridge with all the key cast members this time. And best of all, he's just like such a smug jerk. I love, he really did a lot with him. I really enjoy that character a lot. Having just rewatched it, I forgot how much I enjoy this Benzite.
That was fun. That was fun because I got on their nerves. I pissed them off, and then I love it. Picard, got to dress me down. He yelled at me, and when people say, "Who were you?" and I go, "I was the blue-headed guy that Picard yelled at in Manner of Honor." They go, "Oh my God, I remember that." So it was really fun. And I remember Patrick Stewart at the time was just starting to do the Apple commercials, the Apple II or the Apple lease. I don't know what it was, but he was doing some Apple, big contract, and I was talking to him about that because I was an Apple guy since '84, and I got to fart around with Michael Dorn, greatest guy ever, sweet guy. Uh, Brent, I got to know Brent Spiner, and then years later, I didn't work with him again, but we've kept in touch, and we have a lot of mutual friends. Johnny Frakes, love that guy, and as directors, we used to text each other on different shows all the time. Um, great reunion with him. I was supposed to see him back east this summer, but then the pandemic happened. He also has a place in the east. Those guys were great. I remember Marina was so smitten with Rob Bowman, the director, on that episode that I watched a whole like romance in her mind start, and end in 8 days. Um, who else? I didn't really. Yeah, those were the dudes, and Will. I haven't talked to Will in years. I assume he would remember me or recall me, but that guy's salt of the earth. That guy.
So we got to get Frakes to get you to direct an episode of Discovery.
I'd love to. Why is he on Discovery?
He's directed a few. Yeah, I think he directed
Oh,
also
good.
one or two of Picard as well.
Oh, he's good. I wish I could. I want to see Picard, but I refuse to pay CBS All Access another dollar. So I want to see that. I heard it was coming. I'd love to do that show. It's right up my alley. I mean, I'm so good with effects. It's part of the best thing I do. And but I don't know. That's a click you got to really. It's hard to get in. You know, really hard to get in.
So you have one last appearance in the Star Trek franchise, and that is in Star Trek Generations. You're a reporter. In fact, you're the one who stands behind Captain Kirk for a lot of it. You're also following around Scotty here and there. I just watched it, in fact, and I was like screenshotting all the times you appear on screen. So yeah, tell us about Star Trek Generations, because that's pretty crazy too. It go from basically the TV show to the movie, and just how many more extras they shoved into that scene in particular. It's just like
Yeah.
so much going on in that one scene.
Well, I had a couple scenes. It had one in the later, and I don't know if it was cut out. I think some of it was cut out. But Junie Lowry Johnson, who cast the TV show, wanted to bring all of the guest actors back and put them in the small parts in the movie because clearly they're aware of the fan base and the history, and they they're good. They're good about that, and they want to bring these people back. She begged me to do the little part of the guy with the camera on his head, the reporter. And my buddy Tommy Hinckley, who played the guy with the sound, the microphone, we were there together a lot. He was on some Next Generation show as well. So me and Tommy, and we knew each other for years. We were basketball buddies. Um, we we were on the bridge for that opening sequence, when Shatner was there and Scotty and Walter and, Chekhov and Scotty and Shatner and Alan Ruck. So I got cast. She said, "Oh, you got to do it. Everyone's doing it. All the people are doing." I go, "Okay, all right." What was great for me was I didn't have to be talked into it. I just wanted to be in it and see what was going on. I wanted to get in the building basically. It was pretty amazing. It was like 3 or 4 days on the bridge. It might have turned into 5. And aside from all the, they must have had, I don't know, 35 extras that were just extras. And then there was me and Tommy because we had dialogue, and then there were a few other people that had dialogue, and they just, we were pushed into the crowd. I got to see some amazing stuff. John Alonzo was the director of photography, and on the Panavision camera was a plaque of John Alonzo's movies, that and listed them. They were on the camera, and it was like he was a legend in his own time. And he was this little Italian guy with his little hat and everything, and he would, he'd bark his commands to his guys, and I was looking at him, I was going, this guy did some big movies, and of course they're all escaping me, but they were big, like The Godfather big. He was that guy. And well, he's done some huge movies, and I apologize for not remembering them. So he's there, and he's like, and I was watching him a lot and how he worked, and he wanted to get the work done. You know, he wasn't the guy that was wanting to sit around and feather the light, and color everything. And he was literally going, "Are we gonna admire it or shoot it?" You know. And I'm like going, "I love this guy. This is the famous John Alonzo." So he was there being his with his ego, which was really fun to watch. And then you had, Shatner, who walks in, with basically a force field of ego. But what was amazing about I think it was the first movie since the original movies, the features that came out. I think it was the first series where, he appeared. He's going to appear in another one as a guest. So he walks onto the stage, and all the extras start applauding him. Okay, so he's already got he's already got his audience basically, and everybody stopped and he like said hello and everything, and then of course, he said, "Well, it's good to be on the Enterprise again." And of course, it looked completely different. And so we start working with him, and he he had just written his book, his memoir, the Star Trek memoir, and he's not well liked by his cast members, according to the book, and and James Doohan uh, did not like him that day or that week, and neither did Walter. And I knew this because I had read the book, and I could tell they're no, they're not talking to him, they're not hugging him, they're not shaking his hand, they're literally just like this. And I'm going, wow, it's like 30 years, okay, since they originally did the original show, and like I'm looking at them, and there they are. There's those three titans, and these two clearly hate that guy, and he has no idea, or he's just being himself, which is just so fun to watch. Oblivious pompous guy, and he'd done a bunch of television at that point. He was TJ Hooker already, and I don't know if he had done he hadn't done Boston Legal yet, but
He had just done Tech War, which no one remembers except for me.
Tech War, oh my god, I remember that.
And now there's two
so
people who remember it.
So there's so many good stories about him. So every day, I would just like try to memorize and record everything he did. And I would run home and tell my wife about it and call my sister, and anybody would listen. I go, "You're not gonna believe what happened today." So the one day, like if you see this behind me, there's the turbo lift right there. Well, there was one of those on the set, and the scene called for the three of them to walk onto the bridge for the first time, before takeoff. And Alan Ruck says, "Welcome aboard," and la la la, and he goes and sits down. So those doors get opened and shut by a person. And so the doors open, they go, "Okay, rolling," and they get, and they have to go in there, the three of them. And I'm elbowing Tommy. I go, "Those guys hate him, and they're going to have to go in that little booth and close the door until action is called." And there was a bunch of dialogue before the doors open. So, there's Alan Ruck's doing his bit, and they're covering that. And then, like, I'm not 10 seconds into the scene, the door opens and the three of them walk in, and then they do, they go do their scene, their greeting and all that stuff. And right before, the take started, Tommy and I were constantly looking into this door that they were in, and Walter was like this against the wall, and Jimmy Doohan was like this, and Shatner was, he was, "Well, this is kind of fun, and it's kind of different to be here again." And they're not even answering. The doors close, and then action is called, and they're in there for, they're baking together. I just wanted to be inside. That's all. I wanted to know what was being going on in there. So that stuff happened all week. And then I had to do stuff with him. I had literally had a scene with him. I talked to his character, but he treated me like an extra. So he thought I was, and of course he has no idea that I'd been on a million television shows at that time. I was a working actor. He doesn't know any of this stuff. But he treated me like an extra, which is really, I was, mildly annoyed, but I was also like, I just was thinking, I can't wait to tell everybody this. This is the best thing ever. William Shatner, Captain Kirk, he thinks I'm a bit extra guy. There's a scene where he has to like cast me aside, don't get that out of my face, because I'm constantly doing this, to bug him with the camera because I'm the camera shooting guy. And Tommy's down there sticking the mic in his face. And he we do a rehearsal and he literally throws me into a light stand. He literally just the guy goes, get that out of there. I'm not kidding. We were up on a platform and I stumbled back and I almost knock over, a baby par light or something, or and or and and I went up to him after. I go, hey, Bill. I called him Bill because I refused to say Mr. Shatner. I said, listen, just put your hand on me. Let me do the work, okay? Because I almost knocked the lamp over just now. He would not look at me. He'd like look to the director and go, how can we make this work? I'm literally, and I'm literally going, I just told you how we can make it work. Let me do all the work. Just give me the motion of the hand. Isn't that what we do? Anyway, it was infuriating. So the rest of the week, he was like, he would not talk to me. He would not acknowledge me. It was the best thing ever. And then at the end, when he finished, he's, everyone stops and applauds. Ladies and gentlemen, that's William Shatner's last scene in the show. We want to thank him. And, and everybody's down in the little circle, that the one like I'm sitting in now. And, and he's up on the, the rail there. And he's, thank you. And, there's all this thing. And like everybody's out there applauding, a sea of people applauding. This is me. That's what I was doing. I was just eyeballing the guy. It was fantastic. He didn't even see me probably. But there was just stuff like that happened every day. And then one there was a scene in the movie where he stands at the directors. He stands at the captain's chair with Alan Ruck, and he they have an exchange, and Alan Ruck asks him to go take his seat, and he doesn't. And he doesn't sit in the captain's chair on the Enterprise. He has to go sit along the rail, with the rest of them. And so they did that scene and everything. And like the next day, we're setting up to do a whole different scene. There's a crane hanging out in the middle of the set. There's like all this shit is doing, and I was sitting down in this little pit area with Tommy, and I listened to Shatner say to David Carson, I think we missed something yesterday. And like I'm elbowing Tommy. I'm going, what's he gonna say? What's he gonna do? And he said, I think we need to do the scene at the captain's chair again. I think I missed something. And David, who's British guy, goes, oh, really? Well, what should we miss? He goes, well, I really think I should have taken a moment with the captain's chair before I release it and go. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, he's going to make us reshoot. We're going to be here forever. I'm going to get more overtime. This is fantastic. So, and David Carson said, yes, all right, I think we can work that in today. So during the day, at some point, we set up to do that shot again. And I don't think you can see my chair in this shot. Yeah. Okay. So I gotta get down here. Okay, see the chair. So they do the scene like this. I'm bent down because I'll disappear if I stand up. Okay. So he does the scene again, and right before he leaves, this is all he did. He wanted to reshoot because he wanted to fondle the chair. So you'll see him touch the chair like this, like that, and look forlornly at it, and then he goes off and takes a seat. And that must have taken 3 hours to do.
I can literally tell you, I was just rewatching the movie and watching that part, and I was like, it's like he really did go out of his way to touch the chair. So I'm glad there actually is a story behind it, because it seems like he really wanted to do something with that chair.
That's amazing that you picked up on that, because I never told you that story till now.
No, I've never heard it before. I just noticed like the way he did it. It seemed extra. It seemed so unnecessary. There would have been such a more subtle way to do it, but it's Shatner, so no.
Pretty hammy. It's pretty hammy. And then there was like an explosion thing, and we all had to do the Shatner, as they say, where we all had to pretend to like shift and the camera dutched, and he was right over my shoulder on one of these, where the railing is, on the set. He was, and he did his usual, and like, da-da, and he'd like grab onto the railing. Well, the railing broke free, and William Shatner flew over me and Tommy's head and fell right down in front of us. And like everybody goes, oh, and he rolls, he goes, I'm all right. I'm all right. And he got up, and everybody was like, oh my God, what happened? What happened? And he broke the set. doing his own bit with the thing. So, oh my God, that was like that was 2 hours right there. 2 hours. He went to the medic, nothing's wrong. Everyone's around him. And then meanwhile, the grips are with screw guns, chains, hacksaws. They were like attaching that rail like within an inch of its life. There's nothing was going to move it but a wrecking ball at that point. 2 hours. That was a good one. But I'd tell you, and every day something like that would happen. And I would go home and I go to my wife, you're not going to believe what happened today. And I'd call anybody who was a Star Trek fan. I'd call them, tell them those stories. And it, so fun. So fun.
That just made Star Trek Generations a lot better for me.
Yeah. And I did get to talk to James Doohan. He was a sweetheart. He'd sit off set in his chair with the rest of us cast, and I got a chance to talk to him. And I asked him, I said, what did you think of the book? And he goes, oh, I haven't read it. And I go, oh. He goes, I'm not going to read it. I go, okay. He goes, my daughter told me, they're about certain things in it, and I don't need to read that. I had a chat with Walter. I actually asked him about it too, and he just rolled his eyes. Oh man, those guys are great. And then Walter, I didn't get to work with him, but he appeared on Son of the Beach, which was a show I directed, and he was on that show. And who else did I work with on Star Trek? You run into everybody eventually if you'd stay around long enough, But that was fun. Yeah, I don't remember much about the movie. I do remember Alan Ruck, who became a friend, and love that guy. Good actor.
Yeah, I think Alan Ruck's very underappreciated, I feel like, and not just from the Star Trek franchise, but in general. That guy just deserves a lot more credit than he gets.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So seminal, come on. Ferris Bueller, huge.
Exactly, yeah.
Among other things. No, that guy's a good actor. Yeah, so that was my week on Generations. And and then while I'm here on your show, may I just say that in my opinion, all of all the directors of the movies that we've seen, the feature films thus far, I would have to say that Leonard Nimoy and Johnny Frakes were the finest of all the directors of the films, in my opinion. They were just superior, and whether or not they just had better scripts or what it was, who knows? But they just were great, and I was so glad. And John has had such a good career as a director. I mean, just quality, knows his shit. Knows the ins and outs of every story. Knows what it's like to be an actor. Knows what it's like to be a writer. It's just good guy. Good guy. Hats off to that guy.
Let's talk a bit about your directing career, because you've had, I think, probably a bigger directing career than acting, and that's saying a lot because you've had a very long resume of acting roles as well. So I was trying to figure out, what things I wanted to ask you about, and I'm looking at your resume, and it's got Grounded for Life, which is a sitcom I really liked. You did the Tracy Morgan Show. You directed an episode of My Name's Earl, Cougar Town. You did a bunch of episodes of Scrubs, many other things. I was going to ask you about Big Bad Beetleborgs, but I was like, maybe I should ask him about Dick Van Dyke instead, because he did an episode of Murder 101. So can you tell us what it's like to work with the legend and to be directing Dick Van Dyke? That's got to be just intimidating.
Oh no, it wasn't. That
Really?
guy is a sweetheart and nothing to be afraid of. I mean, he's old school. He's an actor. He's not a celebrity. I met him when I was a young man. My mother did a movie called Cold Turkey with him in like 1970 something, and before All in the Family, or like in between pilots of All in the Family. And we went to Des Moines, Iowa, and visited the shoot, and I got to meet Dick. I have a photograph of him, me and my sister, and then boom, years later, I'm at this TV movie factory, at Hallmark Channel, and I'm coming off doing the Poseidon Adventure for them, and I say, hey, you want to do this Murder 101? I go, yeah, I want to do that one because Dick and Barry, and so he was a delight. I mean, I don't know what else to say because he'd done 100 years of diagnosis murder, right? So he's been on television all since we were born. So the guy came in and did his job and was pleasant, and I offered him suggestions only to help him out, but I didn't have to direct that guy. He was basically like, watch for me on this, or did I get this right, or and I was just so happy it was like working with a regular down to earth working actor. And what was fun was he didn't leave the set either. He stayed on the set in his chair and signed autographs. And there was a constant parade of kids and families coming up to him. And like, you'd be setting up a shot and you'd hear something going, you'd hear singing, and you'd turn, you'd look, and he'd be singing Hushabye Mountain from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang to like 4 little kids who came to visit him on the set. And we're just like, literally, like, everyone stops what they're doing and just goes, oh my God, he's singing Hushabye Mountain. So he was great. We had a great time. I wish I could have done another one with him. And his son was cool, Barry. That guy should do voiceovers. I'm sure he does, but boy, well, he's a good voice. So that was really fun. That was actually a corrective experience for me, working at that company. So it was really nice, and that was the last thing I did for them.
Now, for the audience members today who are watching the video version of this episode, they might have noticed that you're wearing a hat today that's got the Route 30 logo. Route 30 is trilogy movies. Those are your babies, basically. You directed, these are your things. So can you tell us a little about the Route 30 series?
Thank you. Yes, when I was working at this television movie factory in the mid 2000s, it's there where I realized that the director in television is not what I was raised to believe a director is. It's not. He's not the original. He's not the author of the piece. Really, it's other people. So that's when I got the idea to go Super 8 style, home movie style, and get a bunch of actors, write a script, and get a video camera, an HD camera, and go off and make some movie, but feature length. So I started with a movie called Mojave Phone Booth as an experiment.
Which I was going to ask about, by the way, because I always love hearing Steve Guttenberg stories, but we'll save that for a sequel episode, I think.
That's where I met Steve on the Poseidon Adventure, and then I asked him, "Hey, do you want to do this 12-day movie for $100, a day?" And we have to do our own makeup and stuff. And he said yes. Yeah, so it started with Mojave Phone Booth, and then pretty soon I got the bug in doing it. I realized, I got to go back to Pennsylvania and shoot some stuff in my hometown, because that's where the good stuff is. And so I started writing this Route 30 movie, and got all my friends together and went back and made that happen. And it turned out to be a huge success back there. The area adopted it as their own, and they came out to all the screenings and premieres and bought DVDs, and were proud of it. And on the opening night of the first film, when I was showing it in Chambersburg or Gettysburg that night, someone asked me, is there going to be a sequel? And I blurted out, no, it's a trilogy. There's 2 more. And I had no plans to make a sequel or a third film at all. And everyone just cheered and roared. And I literally left that day going, well, I guess I'm going to try and make 2 more. And each one got, like the Star Wars original trilogy, how the second one was darker, and then the third one was like tied up a lot of, I followed that route. So the second Route 30 movie was a zany send up of space, and supernatural crap. And And then the third one, I got, I tried to tie up a bunch of loose ends, and it 10 years. I mean, every 3 years, we'd go back there and make these great fun movies. And with each one, the technology improved. But it was me, my cameraman Keith. We each were on a camera. I had a sound guy, and I had a crew. There were no more than 8 of us at one time shooting those movies, and all the actors did their own makeup, and we set them up with what clothes to wear on what day, and they were all their own clothes, and everyone had to drive themselves to work, and all I had to do was fly them to Pennsylvania, make sure they had food money and a place to stay. And we did like a super guerrilla fun low budget movies. But the difference between what you normally hear about those kind of films and me is I don't want it to be stressful or work like. So the edict I had when making all these 3 movies was it's got to be more fun than it is work. And if it's stressful or worky or tiring, we're not doing it right, and I'm going to stop it. And so as a result, I don't like to shoot long days, and I know when I have a shot and I have the take I need, I'm ready to do another one, or I'm ready to move on. I don't need two if one works. What do you need two for? There's no negative that's going to be scratched anymore, you know? That's the reason you used to do protection takes when there was film, because you could never know if the negative was scratched in the mag or there was a hair in the gate, so you'd always do two in case one of them didn't work. Well, with digital, you don't have to do that. You could do it once or twice and move on. So it was really fun, and those films are all available on the route30trilogy.com website. You can click the watch button and it'll take you to Vimeo on demand, and you can rent and watch for very cheaply all of the films and all of the bonus material.
We'll have links to that in the show notes as well. So anybody who wants to check out those films, of course, feel free to. Definitely recommend that you guys do. So, John, you've described yourself as a micro budget filmmaker, or I like to call it often like a guerrilla filmmaker. It's kind of thing that like Werner Herzog will talk about a lot, where it's like basically finding ways to get the job done, whether it's legal or not, finding ways to do it under budget, no budget, whatever it is. So, do you have any advice for any aspiring directors who want to get out there and want to make some work, but they worry about not having a budget, not having any kind of actors or access to things? What would you say to someone to help them get motivated and make a film from start to finish?
Well, I think you got to get over the aspect that you're making the movie, that it has to fit into some uh, known ideal, and you basically, let me rephrase that. You have to look at what you have in your resources, utilize your resources in making your movie, uh, and then write the movie around what you have access to. So this is how I did it with all the Route 30s. If your uncle owns the Ford dealership in your town, then guess where your main character is going to work? You've got a giant car dealership as the backdrop for your movie that costs $2 to make. So you have to be really crafty about what you have. And so I don't write movies just out of thin air anymore. It doesn't work. I literally see a place or go somewhere or have been somewhere that I go, oh my God, that's a unique place. I've got to, there's got to be a scene played here, or and all of a sudden you're going, oh my God, I'm writing a scene here, and this is spiraling off into this, and I could use that place over there. And I love this character that did this one day when I passed him in the hall. And these, think about, don't just sit down and write some doctor, lawyer, emergency actiony movie. Look around, see what you got at what you got at your fingertips, and then figure out how you can make a cool movie with that. And that way it keeps the costs down. And of course you don't want to write anything in that you can't afford to get or do. So that's why my movies are all set in the mountains or in the country or something. I mean, the biggest get we had was that rock quarry in Route 30 Part 1. There was a giant, beautiful rock quarry, never been shot at. I used to swim at it when I was a kid. I found the owner and I said, would you ever let me shoot scenes there. They go, yeah, as long as we can come watch. And all of a sudden, I have the most majestic, location I've ever seen in a movie that cost $60,000. Same with, I think in Route 30. Oh no, in Father and the Bear, which was my last film, which was a drama. I shot the entire thing at the theater, the Summer Stock Theater that I grew up at, which I'm still connected to in many ways. And they gave me they gave me the key. It said, here, just come in and shoot right after the show, the season's over. And I got to use the entire facility and create a whole movie around it. Uh, and that same movie, I got to shoot in a courtroom in downtown Chambersburg with, no lights, just available light. And all I had to do was like pay the guy that let us in on a Saturday. But if you don't ask, you'll never find out. But like I said, the best analogy is if your parents own a country club with a golf course on it, guess what your movie's going to be about? A country club and a golf course. So, those that's the kind of mentality that I would offer to those who want to make a micro budget movie. But you can make a movie today if you know how to run the equipment, which you should know, and you really should know how to edit. You should edit your own movie because you'll become a better filmmaker if you edit stuff that you shot, because you'll know exactly what's lacking, what you didn't get, so for next time. But you should do all that stuff yourself, and then you don't have to rely on 3, 4 other people that you have to beg to do something or try to raise the money or get some scratch to pay them. So it's all about it's okay to do it alone. And if you think about making a narrative film like you would a documentary, you think, well, all I need to make a doc is I need a camera and a couple of little LED lights and a microphone, and I go off and I interview people and on a tripod and I shoot B-roll outside their house or whatever town they're in. That's the mentality you have when you should make a micro budget movie. It's the same mentality. You got a camera, a boom pole, plug it into the camera, and you've got a couple actors and you show up and you do the scene. That's how it works, I think.
It kind of reminds me of a story I just read recently about it was a bet between Bennett Cerf and Dr. Seuss. And basically, he was like limiting. Bennett had like this bet with him, like saying could you write a book with only using like X amount of words, and that's how Dr. Seuss ended up writing Green Eggs and Ham, because it was like he's only
Really?
allowed to use 50 different words.
That's
So
great.
it's basically working within your limitations and your
Yeah.
constraints, but not being limited by those limitations and taking advantage of them, taking advantage of the resources you have.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I find when you have that mindset, you great ideas come front when you think that way. You're not sitting there going, man, how am I going to get a parking lot of 25 people all honking their horns for this one wide shot I want to do? Well, instead of that, you're like, hey, there's a drive-in movie theater over there, and it's never used during the day because it's a drive-in. It has to be at night. What could I shoot at the drive-in? I don't need 25 cars. I've got this incredible open lot drive-in. It, it's just it's hard for a writer to sit down and not want to make their stuff huge and big. But if you're going to do it yourself and use a credit card or crowdfund it or something, and you just you can't have any of that stuff in your movie. And that's why low budget, micro budget movies take place outside and in small towns or in cars or in parks or in houses. But if you're clever about it, you can add production value to that idea. And like I said, you'll just get great ideas come out of limitations.
Very true. So I know we're doing this interview in the middle of a pandemic, and the film industry has kind of come to a bit of a halt. At this point, things are starting to get moving again. But can you tell us a little bit about some projects that you had come out before this began, and what you're hoping to get back to once the world has unpaused itself?
I was doing some television before the pandemic, and that sort of ended. And I got a couple things that are been delayed, jobs. But I don't know what I'm going to do of my own yet, because I my I got to figure out a way to take my own advice and do it extremely cheap, even cheaper than I have been doing it for the past, 10 years, if I want to get back out there. But I've got, a whole list of things that I've been trying to work on and get going, and using the time wisely to plan and, scheme and see what and meanwhile, keeping my eyes open on everything I see and pass. I drive cross country a lot, and I go through some really amazing areas, and I'm always making a note of, wow, this town would look awesome in a movie, and no one's ever seen it. And so I'm always looking as I go. So I have a little notepad with all my stuff.
Very cool.
Nothing to reveal right now.
All right. We'll keep our eyes and ears open for that. So, John, last question for the day. What is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
Oh my God. Just being a part of it in many ways. I got to be a part of two of the sections, really. Next Generation, this series, which was tentpole at the time, and then the movie right after. So it just, glad to have it, and those great stories. I remember them vividly, and I don't think I'll ever forget them. Loads of fun. It's like I don't know. It's like being in a club, kind of, because you run into people all the time, and that have done the show as well. So I don't know. As a fan, being a part of it, is pretty great. The only thing that would have topped it would have been being able to, like, literally visit the real show. But I was so young, and we weren't even in the business then, my family. So we were just theater people at that time. So we never got a shot. Would have been fun though if my mom had ever done a Star Trek. That would have been pretty fun. But she did other stuff instead. It would have been great.
Have you ever gone to any Star Trek conventions, John?
No, I know them well. I've been to Comic Cons and other stuff, but not ever as me, not ever appearing. I've been asked many times. I think they submit you as a potential choice for a convention. I think there's some kind of nominating thing. Anybody can nominate anybody. But so I've had a lot of contact from people over the years wanting to be the nominator of me. And what I have come to realize is I could nominate myself, supposedly, and there's some cut this person takes by nominating you, so they get part of the. I really don't want to sell my signature, and but I think I'm just I'm an alien of the week guy, and I just prefer. I'd love to do a Q&A if I ever was asked, or participate in a panel, but I don't know. I get plenty of mail, and I send the pictures, I sign them, and I send it, but I don't think I get enough to move the needle at a convention. There are other people that do.
Well, I wouldn't sell yourself short. I mean, Trekkies, we love meeting folks who've been in the show, and if you've never done a con, especially, I know folks would love to have a chance to meet you, get to take a picture with you, and just hear all your stories, because yeah, you've clearly got some great ones that you share with us today. And I know, I feel pretty privileged to actually be able to hear them today, and I bet a lot of fans would just love to actually meet Mendon and Mordock. So hopefully one day they'll come out to a convention and do one of them.
Well, if I didn't have to sit behind a desk and sell signatures, I'd be happy to do that. But that part it feels wrong to me. I'd rather just give them away. So.
Well, what if you just walk around with like your photo on your chest and just walk around with the camera and do like a little doc of something about the convention? Can we do that? Is that technicality?
I just can't imagine doing that. It just seems so wrong and self-serving. If there's some way to figure out how to do it, I could make the film about it. Maybe.
That's the next project.
Yeah, maybe. It's something to do.
All right, well, John, thank you so much for your time today. It's been real great. Yeah, stories are amazing. Of course, I always love hearing Shatner stories. Never get tired of those. So yeah, it's been great chatting, and I hope we can do it again some other time. Appreciate all your time, all your generosity, and all your information today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. You're so welcome. That was fun.
So that was our chat with John Putch, who is definitely the kind of guy I could spend all day chatting with, not just about Star Trek, but classic TV, films, directing, all sorts of things. He's got a Rolodex of great stories about some amazing people, and I really had a good time chatting with him today. And I do recommend you check out some of the films that he's made on his own, which we're going to have links for in all the show notes and descriptions for this episode. Now, we didn't mention it in this interview, but the episode Coming of Age was actually nominated for an Emmy in 1988 for Outstanding Achievement in Makeup. That first season of Next Generation garnered 7 nominations total and won 3 awards, with of course many more on the way for future seasons of TNG and other shows. While Benzites debuted on Star Trek The Next Generation, those aliens were seen several times throughout the other series, including on Deep Space Nine, which also had one time where Hilary Shepard played a Benzite, which we spoke to her previously on this show, and Benzites also appeared on Enterprise and on the Lower Decks cartoon. You can also play as a Benzite in Star Trek Online, which explains the reason why Benzites in TNG wear that breathing apparatus and why they stopped by the time they showed up in Deep Space Nine. According to the Star Trek Online game, which by the way is not necessarily considered canon, some Benzites chose to be genetically modified to remove the need for that device. And if you take a deep dive into the Star Trek novels, and even the Star Trek TNG role-playing game from the late 90s, you'll learn that this species has been into genetic modification for quite some time. But if you want to learn more about this complicated thing and the whole canon versus non-canon debates about the Benzites, you'll have to wait for another episode and possibly a whole other podcast just for that. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Trek Untold. Whether you're listening to this show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any audio platforms, or our YouTube channel, youtube.com/nerdnewstoday, please make sure you subscribe to whatever format you're listening to so that you can ensure you get the new episodes of this show as soon as they come out. And that's every Thursday on audio platforms and every Sunday on YouTube for the video version. Please don't forget to check out our Teespring store to check out some of the merch we have for this show at teespring.com/stores/trekuntold. You can also support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold to become a Patreon. We've got a few different tiers that offer some different benefits that you might enjoy, so please take a look if you can. If you want to get updates on who's going to be on the newest episode of the shows, please follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Trek Untold. That's one word, no spaces, Trek Untold. But one of the biggest things you can do to help out this show is to interact with us. Whether that's leaving a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast, or leaving a comment or giving it a thumbs up on YouTube. It costs you nothing but time and helps out this show tremendously to get more attention and get more listeners to help this podcast continue to grow and expand. So until next time, I'm Matthew Kaplowitz. This has been Trek Untold. And remember, fortune favors the bold.